South Korea should be sending more artillery shells. South Korea is a major producer of arms and major exporter of munitions in the world. So South Korea finally firmed up a bit and intimated that we will send artillery shells and lethal weapons. And Putin responded by saying that would be a grave mistake, warning South Korea not to, or else what? We don't know.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin has been on a tour through Southeast Asia this week. And while in North Korea yesterday, he threatened to send weapons to the country if South Korea delivers arms to Ukraine. So, what will all this mean for tensions in the region? Let's speak to Professor Sung-Yoon Lee, North Korea specialist at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington. Sung-Yoon, hello. Thank you for joining the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right. Now, what do you think has shifted this week? What do you think was achieved by Putin and in their, what they call is it a fiery relationship, fiery collaboration?
Putin remains to this day the first and only top Soviet or Russian leader to have visited North Korea. The first visit took place in 2000, and it marks his second visit. He's invested quite a bit in cultivating chummy relations with the North Korean dictator, both the current one and his late father, Kim Jong-il, meeting with both, each of them 3 times. So this is the third summit meeting with Kim Jong-un. The first was in 2019. So we are living, of course, in a different world since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it seems that Putin needs Kim as much as the other way around, which says a lot about the state of affairs, especially Russia's prestige or lack thereof in the world today.
Interesting point there, because you would wonder why Russia would be so desperate to cozy up to North Korea, which, apart from its ability to build up a war machine, is considered by much of the rest of the world to be a country that cannot really feed itself or run its own economy properly.
That's right. North Korea suffered a famine. It's the first ever in world history for an industrialized, urbanized, literate society in peacetime to go through a nationwide famine. The United Nations came out with a monumental 400-page report on North Korea human rights 10 years ago in 2014 and made the very serious allegation that at the highest level of state, meaning the Kim dynasty, they are guilty of knowingly causing prolonged starvation, a policy of, quote, deliberate mass starvation, end quote. So it's a unique country, but they have weapons. They have one of the biggest standing armies in the world for a small nation of 25 million people, and they have millions of artillery shells. The South Korean defense minister the other day said he estimates North Korea has sent almost 5 million artillery shells to Russia to be used in Ukraine. And that's the source of this chummy summit meeting with bonhomie, overflowing goodwill gestures, and so on.
Some of our listeners will be gasping at that UN report concluding that North Korea deliberately starved its people. Do we know why?
It's hard to explain, but I think, keeping the people ever more dependent on the state for sustenance, for livelihood, for their lives. I think that's the goal, and keeping them in a chronic state of fatigue, malaise. I think the regime sees it to be in its benefit to terrorize the people like that. North Korean people are the most systematically information deprived people on earth, so they don't really know how, relatively to the rest of the world, how oppressed they are.
And what about the response of the South Korean president, Yoon Suk-yeol, saying that if you go ahead and with this mutual defense deal, then we will send weapons to Ukraine, because thus far South Korea has only sent non-lethal and humanitarian aid to Kiev. I mean, what could they send South Korea?
Yeah, South Korea has a world-class military and one of the biggest standing armies in the world today. So it's a rough neighborhood, Northeast Asia. You have China, Russia, North Korea, South Korea. Japan has a world-class military too. And then, of course, the US presence in both South Korea and China. South Korea should be sending more artillery shells. South Korea is a major producer of arms, a major exporter of munitions in the world. So South Korea finally firmed up a bit and intimated that we will send artillery shells and lethal weapons. And Putin responded by saying that would be a grave mistake, warning South Korea not to, or else what? We don't know.
And When it comes to South Korea's security, how imperiled do you think they must be feeling now? And are they justified in feeling that war with the North got a little bit closer?
Well, the US troops' presence in South Korea since the Korean War days in the 1950s, I think that is a major factor in deterring North Korea. Don't go there, don't try another adventurous invasion of the South, because the presence of human lives, Americans standing in harm's way, meaning that they would be among the first to be sacrificed in the case of another war, has sent a message, strong message to North Korea. Don't even go there, don't even think about it. If you do, we will march into Pyongyang and end you. That's been the implicit message that has held the balance, prevented an active war, an actual war, over the past 70 years or so. But South Korea is a rich democracy, meaning it has a lot more to lose in the event there is a war. And the pain threshold for dictators like Putin and Kim, that's a major strategic advantage vis-a-vis a democracy, which would be shattered if you have 100,000 battle deaths.
So North Korea and Russia now have this fiery friendship. I'm just reading a headline from one article here. It says, China will be watching. What do you think China makes of this? Because at one point they signed a deal with Putin and said there is no limits to the depths of our friendship and cooperation.
Yes, and historically, when North Korea inches away from China, for instance, in the mid 1960s, and cozied up to Moscow, the Chinese grow very displeased, but they calm themselves down, and in the end, end up giving more aid, more food, more investment to North Korea, and coax North Korea back into the Chinese orbit. So, I would not be surprised, say, if Kim Jong Un showed up in Beijing, next week or in the coming weeks. It's been 5 years since the last summit meeting between the Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Kim Jong Un. So the Chinese are probably thinking about inviting Kim for now.
All right. Thank you very much. Sung-Yoon Lee, North Korea
Thank you.
specialist at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington.